everybody. Welcome to Outlaw Radio. I'm probably going to get in trouble for airing that song, but whatever. I'm going to enjoy it today. Not sure how long I'm going to go for tonight. I know I'd promised for a week or so that I was going to. Are we on? I think we're on. Are we on, everybody? Hello, hello. Hope we're doing okay today. I'll make this. Anyways, if you can hear me in the chat, let me know. And if you can't, that'll be good to know as well. Is everybody working? Hello there, Brandon Lauren. Can you hear me? Want to make sure. I'm not sure if my microphone is picking me up today. Okay, then we're going to go with that. Hi. Probably won't go super long today. I had wanted to talk about some of my other interests and things that fulfill me creatively, obviously. Last week I spoke about my introduction to wrestling and how I got involved in that and why I've been doing that for the last 30 years. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about creative pursuits involving books, which is really sort of my first real love. You know what I mean? It was really sparked the old noodle and got things going. I remember being a voracious reader when I was really little, and all the way through the early grades, spending way too much time at the school library, reading the same 2 or 3 books over and over again. Now, I don't remember what all those books were, but I do know that I spent a lot of time going back and forth with the same ones, because that's what you do, especially when you're young. You find your comfort story with your comfort characters that you relate to the best, and you go back and forth with them for a long time, and you keep going back to them because they bring you joy, and they bring you happiness, and they bring you that sense of connection, where you feel in constant contact, connected in contact. I use the same. I'm tired. It's been a day. Anyways, I always remember the first real big chapter book that I ever read. And a chapter book, yes, that's what my daughter calls them now. It's a chapter book, something without pictures, something without prompts or anything like that. And it was when I was 9 years old. My family took a car trip where we live here in Winnipeg, all the way up to the east coast of the country to Nova Scotia. It was a drive that took us 7 days because it was myself and my younger brother and sister in the back of my dad's old Chevy. And that was a long-ass drive. So we went to the library, and I got permission to take books out longer than the typical 3 to 4 weeks. So instead of just taking out the usual asterisks and obliques or the Tintin books, because I like graphic novels back then, and even though I didn't realize that's what they were called, that's when I first got my first ever chapter book. And the first one I read all the way through was the novelization for The Empire Strikes Back. And that was an eye-opener, getting to see how the book was and how the story was expanded upon and gave me more in-depth into the characters of, Han and Leia and Luke, obviously, and some of the motivations involved there and some of their fears, stuff that you can't really get in, 120 minutes on the screen, even though that is gorgeous and a wonderful movie, of course. But seeing the difference in the book and how it was written and how that expanded upon the ideas and the themes really appealed to me in a lot of ways, which is why I went out of my way to find as many books as I could from there, including, of course, Splinter of the Mind's Eye, the first canon book that came out. And yes, I know, and it's really confused the heck out of me. So I'd seen all the movies, I'd read Empire Strikes Back, trying to figure out where this one fits in. Really screwed me up, but Alan Dean Foster's made quite a career for himself through the 80s and 90s doing either film adaptations or, yes, Kyber, that's right, or variations and fan fictions, I guess, for lack of a better word, or non-canon canons of stories. This is really one that really caught my imagination. A couple other favorites I really liked when I was younger. I got introduced to the world of Gordon Corman. Gordon Corman was a young adult author, and his Bruno and Boots series about a bunch of young men and an all-boys prep school in the province of Ontario was interesting to me. And it was an experience I couldn't really relate to as a, not homeschool, but a kid that lived at home with his parents all the way through his educational life. What I love the most about that, and one of the inspiration for me, is that Gordon Corman's first book, I don't think it was Beware the Fish, I'm pretty sure it was This Can't Be Happening in McDonald Hall. I found it afterwards. He wrote that and had it published when he was like 13 or 14 years old. And that blew my mind. And that right there was where I realized that even as a young person, as a kid, that if I had an idea that was up here and I could get it out here, and it could be something good, then, maybe other people would read it. It's the first time it ever occurred to me. And it's also when I was reading these books that I got the idea to start writing my own stuff. And there was stories and drabbles and things that I did, with my friends and otherwise, but I enjoyed the process thoroughly. And it was very interesting to know that it was the first time I had the experience that the things that I consumed, whether it's, TV, movies, and books, were things that I could create. And that I found very, very, very encouraging. A couple of the quick ones I'm going to go through here. When I got to high school, I started reading the Myth Inc. books by Robert Asprin. These were a very fun tale. Oh, I can't quite see them here. These were, fantasy, science fiction-y books that were also, comedic. Very much in the vein of like, I don't want to say like a Hitchhiker's Guide, but it's very much more like a, what was the Discworld, a Terry Pratchett, where Terry Pratchett would take concepts and themes from a very British perspective of what your typical science fiction and fantasy stuff would be, turn it on its head a little bit and have a little fun with it. That's what Robert Asprin really did. I really loved the adventures following Skeeve as he would, meet up with different conmen all over across the multiverse and get himself into jams, find his way out of them. It was a great way to mix and match high fantasy with 1920s gangster worlds to monsters and demons. It was and it was always fun. It was always really fun, and I always got into that. Two more favorites of mine, then I'll get to the questions and comments I had before. This man is a legend. Guy Gavriel Kay is a Canadian author. The Find of Our Tapestry is a masterpiece of 3 different books that are some of my first dabblings into high fantasy. And also were the first time that I ever realized what has now a very popular trope, but was my first experience with it, which is young adults from our world somehow being magically transported to a fantasy world and having to contemplate fish out of water, finding their role in this new world, how it relates to their time outside of that, and how that sort of stuff is more important than finding the parallels between the real world they're from, how those skills translate into the fantasy world, and again, learning more about themselves and destiny, and really finding out what are the most important things that you have in your life, which end up being love, friendship, family, and all the good things, all the really good things. And also they're a little naughty at times. And for a young man in high school, I tell you, there's some saucy stuff in here. I mean, not quite like Tigana. Tigana is like the book he did after that blew my mind for many different other reasons. We're going to leave that alone. Anyways, and finally, I'm going to bring out my current favorite, a gentleman I've had the pleasure to meet, along with, of course, Canadian icon Ms. Tanya Huff at KeyCon this year. I had a chance to meet and speak into a panel with Mr. Jim Butcher. This is my favorite book in his Dresden Files series, Changes. It is the 12th book, and it is the book where he breaks his own format, and it's no longer just a case of the year sort of thing, and it sort of upsets the tea kettle of his entire world and sends Harry Dresden on a different adventure. I always love the concept of the hard-boiled detective who was also a wizard. So the cases he solved weren't necessarily just your typical murder and mayhem, but they were more of a, what am I saying here? Well, they're fantastical in nature. I loved this. This was very much where I like high fantasy and, sword and sorcery as much as the next guy. An actual, honest to goodness, urban fantasy book where it takes place in real Chicago, kind of, but has so much reference to myth and magic, and there's so much out there. I can't recommend these enough. I fully relate to Mr. Harry Dresden, not just because he's got a fancy hat and a big old stick. I fully relate to Mr. Harry Dresden, the main character, for constantly being the protagonist who takes the biggest beating in every book and still sort of manages to pull it out at the end. Even when he loses, he wins, and even when he wins, he loses, and I kind of like that. Very much true to the crime noir that, of course, Mr. Butcher's trying to emulate. So those are some of my favorites. There's so many others. Obviously, I could talk about, obviously, Robert Jordan, The Wheel of Time. I love those books. I've mentioned it before. Some of the first real fantasy books I read, books by Lloyd Alexander. Obviously, I saw the Black Cauldron cartoon when it came out from Disney. When I found out it was a series of books, well, of course, I had to read all 5 of those. And I've had multiple versions of those over the course of time. Obviously, C.S. Lewis and the Chronicles of Narnia. Those were big in my life as well. And if before anybody asks, no, I'm not really a Game of Thrones guy. Sorry, Ken. I couldn't do that. Yes, no, don't pick up the coin. That's exactly right. You know what I'm talking about, Brenda Lauren. I appreciate that. Yes. You don't want to be a Knight of the Black and Denarius. That is true. The Sheila seemed pretty cool. That'd be kind of fun to have in your head. And we're back. So, like I said, I don't think I'm going to go very long tonight. I'm not gonna lie, it's been a day. And I've got a lot going on. But I've made a commitment to try to do one of these every week. So thank you for showing up and thank you for hanging out. What I'm going to do is I did put it out there on my socials, and by that I also mean on my Facebook, which I got some responses. Got some questions about creative writing and art, and just questions I can answer. Now, these are all people that are in my circle or people that I know who've reached out to me. And if you can hear, and if you have trouble hearing me now, I'm sorry. My furnace is going off in the background. I don't exactly have a studio. I have a basement, though. It's nice. It's nice. I like it here. It's my favorite. Anyways, tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the questions I got. Now, Scotty Pankhurst, Scotty Justice, dear friend of mine, who I adore. One of the kids. He's not a kid anymore. You're not even a young man anymore, Scotty. But I love you all the way down there in Australia. Keep up all the great work you do, the pro wrestling scene there, and just by being a good man. But also, I know how deeply involved he is in creating his own RPG systems and worlds, and I think that's great. Scotty asked me when it relates to my own books, which of course I should talk about right now. Oh, hang on. Let me just. Oh, there we go. I knew I was missing something. Talking about my own books here. My books that I created right here, and there's a link for them below. So books 1 and book 2, my series, my Overdrive series. Book number 1, Cowboy Ending. Book number 2, Outlaw Justice, and book 3, Prairie Fire. I don't have any copies of right now. They sold out, but you can get them all at the link below on Amazon. Scott was asking me how many drafts and rewrites it take before I released my first book. Drafts, hard to say. Getting all the way through the first draft of Cowboy Ending took me about, I want to say, 3 months. Once I did that, then the editing process was a bear, because you get to a point with any creative process where you can tinker, and finally, George Lucas, you have to just let it go. You have to say to yourself, it's done as it's going to be, and with anything you do, the more you tinker with it, the less likely you are to release it, because you're going to think it's never good enough, and you're never going to realize it's there. So with that said, I probably did 3 complete drafts, and then I handed it off to a beta reader, who was a couple of beta readers, a couple of people I worked with, my ex-wife, and one of my dear friends. And they came back to me and made sure everything sort of made sense. And then I did one final draft, so let's call it 3.5, 4. And then I went to go to release it. Now, how did I find the editor and know they were right for you? I went to people that I knew that I thought loved me, but also would be honest with me, right? I don't have a professional editor. According to some of my reviews, I probably should, but that's okay. According to my old writing teacher, I should invest in a copy editor. Hang on a second. This live stream is brought to you by Pepsi Max. Sorry, Dad, I didn't have any Coke on sale. Love you, Dad. God bless you. So editors, I just went to people that I knew would be honest with me. They wouldn't be yes men. They wouldn't just tell me, it's great. I liked it. I was looking for people who would find problems, would find discrepancies, and would find places where I'd maybe said something before or where I'd screwed up my plot or I'd been repetitive. So I did that, and I took their notes seriously. And then after I was done taking their notes, I put it all together and then just finally said, okay, we're game time. Let's go. And when it came to publishing distribution, here's the thing. When I was much younger, I wrote my first ever book. Yes, this is the first book I've published. But the first book I wrote, the Book of Quorum, I wrote when I was 19, 20 years old. And I wrote it in a hazy, D&D-fueled, lovesick fever dream for an old girlfriend. And that is a true story. And I wrote 160, 170,000 words. And it was awful. But I was so enamored with it that at that point in time, I sent it out to every publisher I could think of. And I'm talking printed off whole 200 pages of this thing, 200 plus pages. And I sent it up to publishing houses. And for a while, I kept all the rejection letters, but they're gone now. They're gone now because I don't need that kind of negativity in my life. I just don't. So my point is that I sort of gave up on writing for the longest time, went into other pursuits. And it wasn't until we got to like 2010, 11, 12, when I started realizing that self-publishing was more than just like a Friesen press or a niche publisher where you pay them a crap ton of money and they give you like 1,000 copies of your book and then you have to sell them out of the back of your car for the rest of your life, like you're a sad dad rock band with your CDs that you've burned. I have those too. The point is, is that once I saw the popularity of like ebooks and Kindles and options exploding, suddenly I realized I had an avenue to get my work out there. Now, obviously, the ebook market is flooded these days with a whole bunch of AI crap, but there was a whole bunch of crap back then too, where people were banging out like 5,000 words, calling it an ebook and trying to, slap it out online. And, first I went through smashwords.com with Mr. Mark Coker's website, which is fantastic, and I still recommend it. And I still have my stuff up on there today. But I had the most of my success, sadly enough, going through Amazon.com, which, considering the popularity of the Kindle and the Kindle app and everything like that, was really just what made sense. So, publishing distribution, I'm a one-man army, my friend. Scotty, I do it all myself. I put it all up there, and there we go. Yes, cozy mysteries like a motherfucker is exactly right. I see you there in the chat, Brandon Lauren. I see you. Thank you for being here, by the way. I appreciate the support. See, that's pretty much it, Scotty. I did 4 or 5 drafts and rewrites. I found editors that I knew and trusted that were going to give it to me straight. And then I just did it all myself. And here I am now, technically working on my 4th book in this series. And I'm still going to be doing it all myself. The only things I did outsource my my cover art. I tried doing it at first. I went to a friend who does a little bit of graphic design. I realized they are not the right person. So I found somebody who's made hundreds and hundreds of the covers for a whole bunch of different style of books. Maybe she does a fair bit of the romancy style, but I quite like her work. She's been very consistent. With that said, when I finish my 4th book, and I hope to releasing it in, I know I said ages ago I'd do it in January. It's probably going to be closer to the summertime at this point, but I'm going to be writing it more in the coming days and weeks. I am probably going to get a new cover artist and re-release all of my books with, with a new cover artist. And I think it'll be a good opportunity to rebrand, to start again, and have a little fun with that. And I'm looking forward to that. So if you have any cover artists out there, recommend them to me. I'd be more than happy to talk turkey with them and get that going. So thank you, Scotty. My good friend Leo Samaras, Leo London, another fine young man wrestler who's very big into his gaming world right now, and I love him for it, has asked me if I've read the Dragonlance novels. And the correct answer is I've read the original Dragonlance novels by Weiss Nickman, and I did read the Twins books that came after that. I did try to read I'm sure I read the final trilogy by Weiss Nickman, but I didn't enjoy that as much. And I did try to read some of the companion pieces as they branched out from the main story. But yeah, of course I read them. They were seminal reading for a dork back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And yeah, I gave them a go. I gave them a real go. And do I have a favorite character or event in the book? It's so easy to say Caramon and Raistlin because they were the twins. And no matter how much the first trilogy is about Tanis, the half-elf, and his relationship and his sense of not feeling like he's good enough for either side of his heritage, which is a very common theme for any teenage young man to be wanted to go through. I, of course, related most to Caramon, the warrior, the giant who always felt like he was in the shadow of his much more intelligent, much more skilled brother, who, of course, would go on to Darth Sidious and betray everybody. Or did he? Hard to say. As for favorite event in the book, oh God, I couldn't tell you. I realized the whole premise of the second trilogy was the whole time travel. Raistlin was the progenitor of his own of his own future. You know, I thought that was interesting, but not my favorite stuff. I'd have to go back over them and read them all again to give a real honest answer there, Leo. But thank you. I did read those books, and I did think they were fine. Finally, the person who asked me some questions here, Christina Freeman. Christina, I only know online, and she's been in some of the literary circles we've been through before. She's been a great supporter. She's read my books, and I really appreciate that. And I have to make a better effort to read all of her stuff as well. But Christina says that she feels like people have unrealistic ideas about how long it takes for a book to go from idea to book and how many people are involved in the process. So obviously I answered some of these questions she had before about, do I have a developmental editor? Not really. It's me. Do I have sensitivity readers? No, I don't. And Papa Covers. Okay, so those are, yes, those are, she's actually recommending here. She's got a group called the feralwritersclub.net. I took a look at the website. It looks like a great community of independent authors and author-adjacent people. So if you're in the process of doing your own work and you're looking for a place online to go to find some support, whether that's editors, readers, cover artists, please go to the feralwritersclub.net, and I'm sure you'll find somebody there. But I will say and comment on this. One second. Get a little dry in the throat there. There's some good ASMR. I also feel like people have unrealistic ideas how long it takes for a book to go from idea to book. I had the idea for this book at least 5 years before I started being serious about it. At least 5 years. I knew the main character. I knew the main character's name. I had a general idea of the supernatural setting. I knew that I wanted to write an urban fantasy tale that didn't involve vampires or werewolves because they were just flooding the system at the time. If I'd have been smarter, I'd have leaned into it and done a vampire and werewolf tale because maybe I would have sold it. The point is, I was trying to be different because that's what you do, right? You think you got to do things your own way, whether you actually do or not. So be that as it may. My point is that it took me getting to a point where I realized I'd had the idea, and much like we say with any creative pursuit, much like I said about doing a live stream, doing a podcast, doing whatever, I'd had the idea about doing it for years and years and years, but it wasn't until I actually sat down and just started doing the work that I got anywhere with it. With this book, after the 5 years of ideas and notes and things like that, I finally just was working a night job at the time and had a scrap piece of paper and a scrap notebook, which I almost always have. I always have a scrap bit of notebook with me anyway, so I can always sketch ideas out or whatever. And I made a coherent effort over the course of 2 days to have a rough plot of what I wanted to do from beginning to end of the story. Now, we can talk about writing process another time. I'm not really going to go too deep into that, but I will say that what I loved about this the best was once I began the process, I found it impossible to stop. Every one of these books, every one of them that I've completed, I get to a point in the writing process where even if it's taken me years to get to that point, once I'm at the point where I've set up all my dominoes in a row, I then hit that final one. And however long it takes me to finish the book, I probably don't stop until it's done. With book 2, I did a lot of that writing in a haze. My daughter was very young, and I was working nights and stuff. I'm story my life. But once I got to the point where I was beginning the third act and on the road home, I wrote in a haze. I would sleep for 3 hours, get up, find a place to have a coffee, bang out words until I had to pick up my kid from daycare, and then I would go from there, and I would go at night. It was nuts, but I loved it. I loved that process. So from idea to print or e-print or whatever, it can take forever, but it doesn't have to. If you've got the commitment and the time to be able to commit the time, it's as long or as short as you want it to be, really. That said, decent sized book, if you're talking between 65 and 80,000 words, which is your standard, trade paperback, you're probably looking at 18 months, to be perfectly honest, from concept to production to finalizing it and then to getting out in the world. Now, maybe that's quicker or shorter if you've got professional editors and I don't know, let's call them a literary agent or someone cracking the whip on you, keeping you going. I don't have that. I'd like one. Miss Tanyahoff, if you're listening, I would like to talk to you about that again, please, if we could. Anyways, sorry, I'm just pleading now. But yeah, it can take a long time. But much like anything that's worth doing, you do it because you love it. And I love writing. I don't do it enough, but I can't imagine not doing it, right? I love to consume, I love to read, but nothing makes me feel more alive than being able to take what's in here, figuring out why it's there, what it is about my real life that's got this thing in here that I'm metaphoralizing and then needing to put out on paper, metaphorically or otherwise. And yeah, it's pretty great. So thank you to Leo, Scott, and Christina for sending me those questions. Thank you to Brenda Lauren and the one other person who's in the chat right now. You can lurk; it's fine. I don't mind. I'm not going to go any much longer tonight. Like I said, I'm not feeling super great in my head, but that's okay. We have those days. I will say I'm going to do one more next week. I've done 1 week about wrestling. I've done 1 week about writing. I think next week, and I'll post about this in Ken's Discord for anybody who's part of the Blathering crew. I am going to talk a little bit about health and fitness, which I know if you're looking at me right now and you see the jowlies, you're wondering why I want to listen to this guy. But the truth is, I like to think that after 30 years of pro wrestling and 20 years of being pretty serious and consistent in a weight room and in semi-professional athlete status, which I'm not really anymore because I'm old, but I have a lot of stuff to talk about. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put out a post for anybody who out there who has any questions about basic gym etiquette, basic health and fitness, anything about resistance training, anything about nutrition. Again, it's diet zero, diet Pepsi, it's fine. But I would like to talk about that. I would like to talk about why people get obsessed with it. I would like to talk about why I'm obsessed with it. Why, if I don't go to the gym at least 4 days a week, I lose my mind. Why some people do it for good reasons, for bad reasons. And I'd also like to be somebody who's just a real dude that can talk about it, because we all have the socials and stuff, and you see people looking, you know what I'm talking about, the ones who are showing the best, most extreme versions of themselves, and then the rest of us look at that and go, we can't keep up with that sort of shit. I can't anyway. I've worked with many of those athletes that are looking like that, and it's not for everybody. And glad I got to meet you too, man. Thanks for showing up here. So yeah, I'll put a post up in a day or two asking for questions or concerns or ideas for things we'd like to talk about. If you've liked the stream, please like and subscribe and share it. If you don't like it, then just thank you for watching. Find some people who think might enjoy it as well and share it out there. I am hoping to expand this, maybe in a couple of weeks, actually get to the point where I can stream into multiple platforms. I would like to do that. I would like to get to the point where I can get like the overlays. Eventually I'll get like a curtain so you can't see the venting behind me. You're all getting, access to my basement. What can I say? Sound like dirty and demented. All right. Thank you very much for showing up. Have a great night. I appreciate you all. Much love. And yeah, let's do this again next week. Thanks for coming.